Yes, would you ask Ms Johnson to come back in, please? Right, Ms Johnson, ready to carry on?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Good, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Lee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms Johnson, we're still on the topic of TMO scrutiny. Can I ask you please to look at RBK 3030047? Now, this is a document entitled TMO HRA Meeting, 17th of November 2009, and you are recorded as being in attendance together with others, including Mr. Robert Black and Pam Sedgwick, whose name you can see there, and also Celia Chaliscan. Purpose of meeting, Pam explained that before the improvement plan meetings, a quarterly meeting was held to discuss TMO business and performance. And if we go to paragraph 2.6 on page 2, you can see that the minutes record as follows. If we can go to page 2, 2.6, Fire Brigade issues. The TMO has told the Fire Brigade that they must be involved and kept informed of what's happening. The business plan needs to take account of any strategic issues, and this requires further discussion. The risk assessments undertaken gave the same results as those undertaken by the TMO. Do you know what was meant there by the strategic issues that required further consideration?
No.
Did you understand that LFB's issues or concerns about the risk assessments had now been resolved or not?
I don't remember, to be honest. It's from November 2009, and I can't remember.
Right. Is this the first time you've seen this document?
Since 2009, yes.
Right, so you weren't shown this during the course of your composition of your witness statements?
No.
Right. Right. Can we look at page 4? Please, I want to show you the last but one paragraph. Now, in para 9.4, it says this: Laura said she was very pleased with the progress being made against the improvement plan and the business plan. Now, clearly at that stage, you were aware of the improvement plan and what it required, and the business plan and what it required.
Yes.
Were you concerned at that point any longer about any of the issues previously raised by the LFB?
I don't remember.
Right. I mean, it's quite a broad statement. Were there any lingering concerns that you thought needed to be pursued?
If I had thought there'd been any lingering concerns, then I'm sure they would have been documented in this piece of, in these notes of these minutes. But as I have made a statement at 9.4 to say that I was pleased with the progress in the improvement plan and the business plan, then I'm sure I didn't have any lingering concerns.
Can we then look at TMO 00847-363? This is a report by the Executive Director for Housing, Health and Adult Social Care and the Head of Housing, dated the 24th of June 2010, or for a meeting on that date. And it's a report on TMO performance 2009-2010 and TMO performance agreement 2010-11. So, and I think it's right, isn't it, that this was a familiar format or type of report that would be produced from 2009 onwards?
Yes, that's correct.
And signed by you, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
And again, is this we can see your name at page 3, above that of Jean Daintiff. Again, can we take it that although you weren't responsible for the primary drafting of this document, you would have read it, approved it, and would not have signed it unless you had approved it?
That's correct.
Now, can we look, please, at page 3, on page 2? You can see there that paragraph 2 covers TMO performance, and paragraph 3 covers conclusion for 2009 to 10. You can see by the absence there of any reference, that there's no reference to the Salvus management report that we saw earlier about the TMO's fire safety management systems from September 2009, is there?
No.
Nor is there any mention there of the LFB's threatened enforcement notice, albeit, of course, as we know, no enforcement notice was ultimately served.
No, there isn't.
Do you know why that's not there?
No, I don't.
Do you know why there's no reference to the Salvus report?
This was a cover report that went with a more detailed report, so I can't account for it not being mentioned in the cover report. It may well be mentioned in the more detailed report that goes with it.
Right.
If it's not, then I can't account for why it is not in the cover report or why it is not in the more detailed report.
Now, looking at paragraph 3.1 in particular, it says the TMO has had a positive year with tangible performance improvements. Since the completion of the improvement plan in early January, the TMO has been implementing the key strategies and working practices developed as part of the improvement plan and embedded in the new business plan. This will lead to continuing improvement in service delivery and further organisational benefits. Now, the positive year there is described, but that wasn't the case in respect of fire safety, was it?
Clearly not.
No. Do you know why the exception for fire safety was not drawn to the attention of the scrutiny committee?
No, I can't account for it now.
Could we go to page 7, please, and look at paragraph 5.1? And this is, I should tell you, I'm so sorry, I should have been clearer. If you go to page 5, you'll see what this is. This is the report on tenant management organisation. Is this what you refer to as the detailed report?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so that's Appendix 1. And you can see the executive summary there. And if you go to page 7, you can see on that page, item 5, audits 5.1, the table below shows all the audits that have been carried out by the Council on the TMO in 09-10 financial year. And then there's a box, and you can see what's in the box there. The stage reached, quarter, assurance and risk. And you can see, if you cast your eye down the box, that the assurances were all, bar one, satisfactory, specifically in relation to the TMO's health and safety. Can you see that?
Yes.
You can see that health and safety is just below halfway down, and that got a satisfactory assurance with a medium risk. Did that audit include fire safety management processes, or was it a purely financial audit?
Without having the audit in front of me, it's very hard to say, based on the fact that this is from 11 years ago. But it would, from recollection, health and safety would have included fire.
Right, but not just financially, but performance as well.
Yes, but without having the audit in front of me, it's hard to say.
No, I understand. Are you able to explain, given the criticisms of Salvus in its fire safety management report of September 2009, and the threat of enforcement by the LFB also in 2009, how it could be correct to say that health and safety should have a satisfactory assurance with a medium risk?
I can't provide you an answer with that without having view of the health and safety audit. And of course, health and safety, excuse me, if including all areas of health and safety, then accounts for the 6 key areas of health and safety, which is including fire. So I can only draw the conclusion based on this top line set out for me here, that overall there was a satisfactory performance based overall on the health and safety function of the of the TMO.
Let's just take it in stages, doing the best we can without the audit that I can put my hands on immediately. Do I take it that when signing off on the overall, the accompanying report, you would have read this document?
I would have read the audit report, yes.
The audit report?
Yes.
When reading the audit report, would you have checked it and understood what the conclusions set out in it were based on?
The audit reports were audits undertaken by RBKC. The TMO commissioned RBKC to do the audits, but they could have commissioned anybody to do the audits for them. In fact, RBKC's audit function undertook that for them, but they could have had any number of organisations do it for them. And the audits were shared with myself and shared with Robert Black and his team. It wasn't up to me to sign off the audits that the TMO had undertaken. That was between the TMO and the audit team, but I would have read the audits.
You would have read the audits. If you had read the audits, and I apologise for piling hypotheses together, and if there had been reference to the conclusions reached by Salvus in their fire safety management report of September, or perhaps the LFB threat of enforcement, would you have questioned how a satisfactory assurance could have been given for health and safety?
I may well have done, but as I said, it wasn't up to me to sign off the audits because they were done between the TMO and RBKC audit. But as I haven't got the report in front of me, I really can't comment.
Well, you say it wasn't up to you to sign off the audits because they weren't done between the TMO and RBKC audit, but it was your responsibility, and you were taking responsibility not just for describing the audit report, but presenting it. My question is, if you had known of the Salvus report and the LFB threatened enforcement, would you have examined how it could be that the audit could have concluded that health and safety got a satisfactory or medium?
I may well have done, but it is not entirely unusual for LFB to serve enforcement notices on housing organisations for matters that have arisen that require attention. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your whole health and safety function is not satisfactory, or indeed your response to fire is not satisfactory if they serve an enforcement notice about a particular building. I appreciate that you're referring particularly to the overall arrangement for fire risk assessments, but if you were to, I may well have looked at that had I seen the Salvus report, and I can't remember whether I did or not, and taken a look at that and wondered what the references were. But this is purely hypothetical because I don't remember reading the audit. I would have done, but I don't remember.
No, what I'm really trying to get at is really come to the conclusion that in fact you didn't see the Salvus report, because had you seen the Salvus report or a summary of what the Salvus report had said, you wouldn't have sent this report up in the way you did. You would have said, I don't understand why health and safety's got a satisfactory.
I hope I would, but I can't guarantee it. I think it would be false for me to say that I would absolutely have acted in that manner, because I don't think that would be fair.
Well, can you explain to me in the circumstances in which you would have looked at the Salvus report, seen the conclusions in it, but nonetheless signed off on a satisfactory assurance?
I'm not signing it off, so it's not mine to sign off. As I've said, it's not my audit.
But you're presenting this document.
I'm presenting this document as a record.
No, with great respect, you're not. That is why I started with where I started, which is your conclusion at paragraph 3.1. At page 2, let's go back to it. You are you not, endorsing the findings of the audit there?
Yes, I am.
Yes. And let me put it to you this way. Would you, if you had seen the Salvus report and or the LFB enforcement, the facts of the LFB enforcement, have been able to sign off in that way, together with the underlying audit report?
Quite honestly, I don't know.
And my suggestion to you is that either you didn't see or didn't know about those matters, in which case that was a failure of RBKC oversight, or you did, in which case you dropped the ball.
You're very welcome to draw that conclusion.
Thank you. While we're on this document, can I ask you to go to page 6, please? And on that page, we see in the middle of the page, as a pre-penultimate bullet point above performance information, a new customer feedback system called TP Tracker to measure customer satisfaction monthly, and a new customer complaint procedure were introduced early in the year. Systems will need at least another 2 quarters to bed in before meaningful data will be produced. Did you know any more at that time, or ever perhaps, about what the TP Tracker was?
I did at the time know more about it, but I can't recollect now.
Right. Did you understand at the time, or indeed ever, that it was said to be a system to retain data about residents with disabilities?
I don't remember knowing that.
Right. And I want to turn to the TMO performance reviews, very similar to this document, but moving forward in time, if I may. July 2014. Can we go, please, to RBK 3032466? This is the TMO performance review for 2013 to 14 that you exhibit as LJ20. And it's dated the 10th of July 2014 for the Housing and Property Scrutiny Committee. And again, if we can just look down it for the next page or two to page 3, it follows really quite similarly the pattern of what we saw in the 2009-2010 version of this document. And on page 3, we see your name, yes?
Yes.
And again, can we assume that although you didn't draft it, you read it through and approved it and wouldn't have approved it unless you were happy with it?
Yes.
Yes. Can we look at Appendix 1, please? Which, well, in fact, before I take you to that, I should just cite you on paragraph 3, conclusion for 2013 to 14, a challenging and rewarding year for the TMO. Performance against key indicators and audits has achieved good results, and it is delivered in terms of setting up Repairs Direct, increasing resident engagement and resident satisfaction, reducing rent arrears to the lowest ever level, as well as delivering new homes, improving the management of commercial opportunities and parking and spending, the capital programme to maintain and improve the stock, all of which have ensured that the TMO has met the terms set out in the 2013 to 14 performance agreement. Sorry to read that out at length, but it's important you see that that is your conclusion. And then if we move on, please, to Appendix 1 on page 4, we have what I think you call the Audit Report. It's actually called the Annual Review, but maybe nothing turns on that.
It's not an audit report.
It's an annual review?
Yes.
Who actually compiled this part of this document, do you know?
I don't know exactly who did it, but it may have been Celia Chaliscan.
Right. Why do you say that?
Because she put together the report, she compiled the report with help from officers at the TMO.
I see. Now, if you, well, I can ask you this. Was any scrutiny applied to this document by anyone at RBKC? You say that Celia Chaliscan would have drafted it with the TMO.
Yes.
How did that work? Did Celia Chaliscan get presented with material from the TMO which she scrutinised, or was it a joint working effort?
It was somewhat of a joint working effort. So she would ask the TMO for information in order to help put together this report. They would provide her with information or draft various bits of the report that she would then review and amend, and she would go through it and then probably discuss it with Amanda Johnson.
So some of this drafting would be done by the TMO themselves?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
I see. Well, let's see if we can spot any of that. Can we look at Appendix 1, Paragraph 2 on page 4, please? It says, purpose of the report. The purpose of this report is to assess the TMO's performance over the last year, commenting on the various aspects of their activity in the borough which contribute to the council's strategic priorities. So is this right, that in assisting with the drafting of this, the TMO was assisting in the drafting of an assessment of its own performance?
It was helping to provide the information on their performance because there was no one else to provide information on their performance. It was only the TMO that can provide information on their performance.
Yes. Was the TMO's input limited simply to the provision of factual information? or do they actually assist in drafting those parts which could be said to be the exercise of judgment? Do you know?
I don't know in any detail, to be honest with you. Yeah, it may well have been a mix.
Right, okay. If we look at paragraph 3.1, performance indicators, the PI suite reflects the continued themes this year. The targets set have taken account of the potential implications the welfare reform legislation might have, particularly in relation to rent arrears. And then if we look down a little further on the next page, please. There is a bullet point which says the test of opinion. And it says, the test of opinion undertaken as part of the MMA shows the satisfaction ratings amongst tenants and leaseholders has increased from 66% previously in 2006 to 75%. Do you know who drafted that?
No.
Can we look at your witness statement, your first witness statement, please, at page 23? And look at paragraph 95 on that page. This is under the heading, General Fire Safety Measures Across Housing Stock. And you say, I will set out below details from the TMA performance reviews relating to fire safety from the years 2013 to 2016. The generally positive results indicated that the TMA were meeting their KPIs on fire safety across the housing stock in general. Now, KPIs are, of course, key performance indicators. Was that your own opinion there?
I've amended that particular paragraph in a subsequent submission to the inquiry.
Yes.
So that was my opinion based on the information in the annual reports.
Yes. But the statement, the generally positive,
yes.
That was your opinion, right?
That was my opinion based on the 6-monthly and annual performance reports presented to Scrutiny Committee.
Right. Let's go back then to RBK 3032466, please, which is what we were on a minute ago for this particular year. And we can see pages 5, 6, and 7, just casting your eye down those pages, starting on page 5, perhaps. Excuse me. We can see the KPIs and then the results against each other, can't we?
Yes.
Yes. There's no reference there to any performance indicator or KPI relating to fire safety, is there?
No, that's correct.
And there wasn't in this one or in any of the years subsequently?
No, there was a general commentary about fire safety and meeting the requirements, undertaking fire risk assessments, but not KPIs.
Right. How are you able to say that the TMO was performing well because they were meeting the KPIs if the KPIs did not include fire safety?
As I said, I've amended that paragraph in my original statement to exclude the mention of KPIs for fire risk assessments.
Yes.
That was an error in my original statement.
Yes, and it really takes me to this. Can you explain how you made that error originally?
As a shorthand for performance, I used the word KPI, and it was an error on my behalf.
I see. All right. Now let's just look at the rest of the review on page 7 onwards under paragraph 3.2. And I think this will also lead to the same answer given what you've just said. These are reports on various aspects of the TMA's activities, but not part of the KPI monitoring themselves. Is that right?
Rent collection, KPIs and arrears.
Right.
So all of these with happy and smiley faces with percentage against them are key performance indicators.
No, I'm so sorry. Paragraph 3.2 onwards is what I was looking at. If you look at the lower part of the screen.
Yes.
My fault. I should have directed your eye to that. There's audits at the bottom of page 7.
Yes.
And that's not part of the KPI system, is it?
No.
No. And then if you look at page 8, it goes on, 3.3, understand and respond to impact of welfare reform, and on. So this part of this document is not about KPIs, is it?
No, it's just a general commentary on performance.
Yes, thank you. Now, if you go on then to page 50, that's section 3.9, against that confirmation, you can see that this is where the report covers health and safety, can't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And under that, if you look at the bottom of page 15, you can see that it says that the well, it includes fire safety as well as cleanliness.
Yes.
In the box on the left. And then it says the TMO continues to work with the London Fire Brigade, LFB, and RBKC to ensure that residents are safe and the risk of fire in blocks is minimised. The programme of communal area fire risk assessments and their reviews continue. Further significant progress has been made to address the recommendations made by these FRAs. What did you mean, or what was meant there by significant progress?
I don't know specifically in this case, but I presume that that the TMO had in place now a comprehensive set of fire risk assessments, which looked based on risk of buildings that were high risk, medium risk, and low risk, and had a set of actions that came out of those fire risk assessments that they were then addressing through a programme of remediation.
Who made the judgment that there had been significant progress?
This paragraph would have been drafted between Janice Ray and Celia Chalice-Gann to look at what had happened over the period of the last 6 months to a year.
Does that tell us that Janice Ray was herself involved in assessment of something for which she was responsible?
Janice Ray was helping us to draft that report. Yes.
So she was to that extent marking her own homework.
You could look at it like that, but we didn't have that level of forensic detail in terms of looking at what the work of the health and safety team were. So we would have taken it from Janice that there was progress being made, and that she would have then been asked to set out how that was taking place.
What was to stop her? What was to stop you thinking to yourself? Well, she would say that anyway, wouldn't she?
Well, I could have thought that, but Janice Ray is a very good officer for the TMO and did a very good job for them, and I have no reason to believe that she was lying or duplicitous.
Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that she was either lying or duplicitous. What I'm really seeking to get at is why you thought it was appropriate that Janice Ray should play any part at all in the judgment of her own work.
I didn't view it in that context. I can understand how you may take that view, but we're asking for the TMO to provide information on their performance and what has happened over the previous 6 months. And this is a document setting out to the scrutiny committee what has taken place.
Did you appreciate that there's a distinction between providing information to you so that you could judge their performance and them providing you with their own judgment of their performance?
Yes, I can understand that, but I don't think there's really anything. I think for the TMO working with Celia and Amanda to say that they had made significant progress. If they hadn't made significant progress and we had found that actually nothing had changed, then that statement wouldn't have been in there. That would have been challenged by Celia in the drafting.
Did you have any personal oversight of these matters?
Not personally, no, because I didn't go down into that level of detail, bearing in mind that the nature of my job was quite often very general in terms of its view of what was taking place at the TMO.
What was RBKC's oversight of the progress with FRA recommendations at this stage?
I wasn't involved in the progress, in the oversight of the progress against fire risk assessments, and that's really a question that I suggest you ask Amanda Johnson. Right.
Can we go to RBK 403649, please? This is the 2014 to 15 annual review. So similar format again, 9th of July 2015. And if we go down to page 3, we will see again, your name, Director of Housing. Again, I'm going to assume, unless you tell me otherwise, that although you didn't draft it, you would have satisfied yourself that it was appropriate and accurate
yes.
to say your name. And again, we see conclusions, bottom of page 2 over to page 3. First part of paragraph 3.1, the TMA's performance, it's a foot of page 2, TMA's performance across a range of housing service areas has been very good this year. You see that?
Yes.
Can we please go to page 13 in this document, paragraph 3.7, under the annual review, which starts, in fact, on page 4. Paragraph 3.7, health and safety. And again, we've got the same rubric on the left-hand side that we've seen for the previous year. And on the right-hand side, we have a lengthy dissertation on the Health and Safety Action Plan. It says, that's been introduced to facilitate monitoring of compliance with legislation and good practice by the KCTMO H&S Committee. Progress has been noted with, and then there are a large number of bullet points. The second of which says the programme of fire risk assessments and reviews required by the regulatory reform fire safety order is ongoing. The recommendations of the best practice guidance have been adopted with regard to frequency. The closer scrutiny of the fire safety issues on the estates, investigation of fires, false fire alarms, etc. LFB have prioritised familiarisation visits, and then close liaison with LFB with regard to works at Grenfell Tower. Local operational crews regularly attend the block and liaise with the contractors, Rydens, on progress of works, impact on firefighting, etc. And then underneath that, work activity and workplace risk assessments have been reviewed and updated. And it goes on in that vein in relation to other subordinate matters. I've perhaps shown you too much of that than invites an answer to this question, but looking at what you've seen, does this mean that the Health and Safety Action Plan facilitated RBKC monitoring the TMO Health and Safety Committee, or did it refer to the TMO Health and Safety Committee monitoring the compliance of the TMO?
The latter.
The latter. So again, this is TMO's, a committee within the TMO monitoring its own compliance.
Yes.
Did the TMO's Health and Safety Committee report to you, or perhaps Celia Chaliscan or Amanda Johnson, with their findings on compliance and good practice?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Amanda Johnson or Celia Chaliscan.
Well, you say I'd have to ask them. Do I take it from your not knowing that they didn't? Otherwise, you would say yes.
I'm saying I don't know.
Well, you don't know, or you don't remember.
Could you ask me the question again, just so I'm clear?
Did the TMO Health and Safety Committee report to you with their findings on compliance?
No, they did not.
No. Do you know whether they reported to Celia Chaliscan or Amanda Johnson?
No, they did not. They reported into the TMO board.
And did anyone on the TMO board report to Celia Chaliscan or Amanda Johnson?
No, they did not. The TMO board, as I've explained before, was made up of, I believe, 15 members, of which 4 were RBKC nominees, 3 were independents, and the rest were made up of a mixture of tenant and leaseholders. Yes.
Did the RBKC nominees on the TMO board report to anybody in your 120-member staff group?
No, they did not have a formal reporting relationship between myself or with Amanda Johnson or Celia Chaliscan. We would meet on occasion with the RBKC nominees. 2 of them were councillors, one from the minority party and one from the majority party, and then 2 were independents who RBKC interviewed to put forward as their nominations to the board. It used to be 4 councillors who sat on the TMO board, but we changed that in 2009 after the improvement plan was introduced in order to strengthen the TMO board.
And just to be clear, the RBKC nominees who sat on the TMO board were not expected to have open lines of communication with RBKC in respect of TMO business.
They weren't expected to report to us on a regular basis because they're a director of a company as a board and were expected to comply with the codes of governance under that particular regime.
Yes.
But if they had any areas of concern, and on occasions, especially in the early days of us putting independents on the board, they would come, or they would contact me, or they would contact the cabinet member and express those concerns. But during this time, in terms of 2014-15, I don't remember the independents that sat on the TMO, the RBKC nominees to the TMO board expressing any particular concerns to me. They would be expected under their duties as a director of a company on a board to exercise the correct procedures in order to ensure that they ensure the good functioning of that company.
Now, going back to this document, when you wrote your conclusions, or rather when you approved the conclusions that had been written in the report, did you take what I've just read to you here on page 13 under paragraph 3.7.1 at face value?
Yes, I did. If I felt, however, on review of this report, if I felt any of it, based on the information that I had about the TMO, was not accurate or correct, or there was anything in here which I wasn't happy about, then I would go back to Celia and Amanda and query that. But in this case, in terms of the information that is provided here, I took it on face value as being correct.
So can we take it from that you at least were never told that there were significant backlogs still being cleared down, particularly in relation to responsive repairs?
Oh, in responsive repairs, which is different to health and safety. So,
well, all right. It may or may not be, depending on whether those responsive repairs are FRA actions.
True. Well, there's responsive repairs. I would expect the TMO, if they had discussed with me the difference between the FRA actions and responsive repairs. Although they could fall under the same banner, you would expect to divide those two out. I'm not sure in the timeline, really, where I suspect TMO Repairs Direct was in place by this time. I think they came in sort of 2011. I can't remember. I'm sure you have the documentation to set it out. But I certainly was aware of backlogs of repairs during the time that both Morrison's managed the contract. There was a further contractor whose name I forget. And then because of the very difficult getting those external contractors to undertake the responsive repairs service in a way in which the TMO wanted to manage it. It was certainly brought to my attention that was extremely difficult, which helped inform the decision for the TMO to set up Repairs Direct with its own board. Leaving aside responsive repairs, which I can see you have a lot to say about, did anybody tell you at this stage that there were significant backlogs being cleared down? I don't remember, to be honest with you. Even though some of those may have been high risk. No one said to you there are high risk FRA items that are still yet to be cleared down. I don't remember somebody saying that to me specifically. Right. Now, if we go back to your statement, please, page 25, let's look together at paragraph 100 there. It's a long paragraph. In it, you refer to paragraph 3.6 of the 2015 to 2016 TMO performance agreement. That's 4/5 of the way through the paragraph, halfway down your screen. Let's look at that document. That is RBK 50589. And it accompanies, and this is page 1, and this is part of the July 2016 report by Director of Housing and Town Clerk and the Executive Director of Finance. And once again, page 3, your name, once again, is it right, same process by which it came to be produced? Yes. And page 4, we can see again the by now familiar Appendix 1. This is the TMO annual review for 2015 to 16. Can we go to page 29, please, in that? And to page 29, you will see, under health and safety, which is now 3.6, same rubric on the left, and on the right, the health and safety action plan will be reviewed and extended to incorporate any new areas where monitoring of compliance with legislation and good practice is required, specifically. And in the third bullet point down, it says the programme of fire risk assessments and reviews to continue, and more work to ensure actions and recommendations from these are consistently completed in a timely manner. Were you provided with any information about what was being done about actions needed to address issues in the FRAs? I wasn't, but it would have been discussed with Amanda Johnson and Celia Chaniscan. Right. And so, again, the same applies, that this would have been something between them
and you didn't have any oversight of any of the detail.
I didn't have oversight of the detail, but if on Amanda Johnson's regular meetings, monthly meetings with the TMO, which had an agenda, she had felt sufficient concern about any of the items that were raised with her, then she would have brought that to my attention. But I don't remember this being an item that was specifically raised with me.
Right. I'm going to turn next to the question of audits. Before I do, you raised earlier with me the fact that you weren't sure whether the Salvers report was referred to in the 2009 and 10 health and safety audit. Let me show you that. It's RBK 3053601. There it is. It's the final draft of the audit report dated June 2010, circulated in draft to Janice Ray, and the final draft also circulated to Robert Black. And underneath that, you'll see both Pam Sedgwick and you. You see that? Now, it's a long document, and I don't want to ask you to read it all, but there it is. I take it that the answer to this is that you don't remember seeing this particular document at the time, but you would have seen it.
Correct.
In the sense that you can't think of a reason why you wouldn't.
Correct.
Right. We have not been able to find any reference in that document to the Salvers report. Would you wouldn't quarrel with that, would you?
No.
No. Can I ask you then about audits? Can I ask you to go, please, to RBK 3030149? This is your report on TMO performance for 2011 to 2012. Again, and I think we've seen this before, but because I showed you the conclusions at the foot of page 2 and your name at the foot of page 3, and Appendix 1 starts on page 5. Can we go in that, please, to page 21, where we can see the TMO performance agreement, which is what I want to ask you about. Appendix 2. It starts on page 21, as you can see, and if you go, please, to the next page, page 22, you can see that the audits are there set out and the draft audit programme for the following year. And you can see what's set out: service area, key client manager, and audit. Was this a list of internal TMO audits, or was it a list of audits to be performed by RBKC?
It was a list of audits to be undertaken, as I understand it, by RBKC.
Right. I see. Who oversaw those audits being completed?
Well, in terms of the TMO, then it's the name of the client on the list there. And in terms of RBKC, then it would have been the audit manager for RBKC.
Right, so Anthony Parks and Rupa Bowler.
So Anthony Parks and Rupa Bowler are both members of the TMO.
Well, yes, that's what I...
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. So key client, says Anthony Parks. Why is he a key client if he's the TMO?
Because he, I presume, would have been a client of RBKC Audit.
I see what you mean. Right. So he was the audit client for
Yes.
RBKC's audit of the TMO where RBKC was the client.
Yes.
Yes, I follow, I think. Would you read these results when they came in?
Yes, I would.
Now, we can see under the heading HR and Organisational Development, towards the bottom of the page, a box with fire risk assessments in it. Who carried out the fire risk assessment audit?
I don't know, unless I saw the copy of the report.
Right, well, it says key client Lornette Pemberton, but no manager. What was Lornette Pemberton's role?
I don't remember. She was a member of the TMO. I'm not sure what her job was.
Right. Again, so she's the audit client by RBKC in respect of fire risk assessments.
Yeah, so as I said, the TMO commissioned RBKC audit, as though RBKC audit could be like any of the big four audit companies who people get in to do audits, whether that be Ernst & Young or BDO. The TMO commissioned RBKC audit to do that function for them.
Yes. Did you normally then read the final or draft RBKC audit reports for fire risk assessments?
I read the audits that RBKC audit undertook for the TMO in their final. I wouldn't have read the draft. I would have read the final.
Right,
version.
all right. But does that tell us that you would have read RBKC's audit of the TMO's fire risk assessments?
Yes, I probably would, yes.
I see. And what sort of information would that audit that you would have read have contained?
Well, it would depend on the terms of reference for the audit. So that would be agreed between the TMO and RBKC audit.
Yeah, well, you read them. What sort of information do you remember seeing in there?
Well, it's probably been 5 years since I read an audit by RBKC of the TMO. So depending on the terms of reference, then it would cover, how it was ran, and it would look at particular areas of that service. So whether it was done in a timely manner, whether it met expectations, whether it was meeting its performance indicators, and where there were any areas that it wasn't meeting that. But audits can be quite broadly or quite tightly defined depending on how the scope of the audit is set out. So you could have an audit of a building refurbishment, for example, but it could only look at one element of that building refurbishment, i.e. the budget management of it. It might not necessarily look at the programme. So it really depends on how tightly the scope is.
Well, let's just take it in stages. I'm showing you this because it's part of Appendix 2, which is the performance agreement for 2012-2013, which contains what is a draft audit programme. So this is only a draft, and it has fire risk assessments in it. Do you know whether, in fact, there was a final audit done by RBKC in respect of fire risk assessments for the TMO?
I don't recollect, I'm afraid.
You don't. Do you remember in any other year reading a final audit done by RBKC in respect of fire risk assessments?
I don't recollect, but as with all audit programmes, that you would probably do an audit of a particular area once every 3 years in a cycle. So it wouldn't be the custom and practice, in my experience, that audits were undertaken of the same service every year. They would be undertaken in a cycle.
See, I think I'm right in saying that we've never seen an audit report or audit for fire risk assessments ever done by RBKC for the TMO.
Okay.
That doesn't surprise you, does it?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. I read a lot of audit reports undertaken by RBKC of the TMO, and I don't recollect whether fire risk assessments was one of them or not.
Right. Given that we can see in this document, which I take it you're familiar with because it accompanied your report, your 2012 report, that there was going to be, at least in this draft, a fire risk assessment audit. Do you know why one was never carried out?
No, I don't.
Do you know who would have made the decision whether or not it should be carried out?
That decision would have been made by between the TMO and RBKC. So they would have reviewed the audits that were required for that year, and there would have been a discussion about what fell in and fell out of the audit programme, and that would have been agreed between the client and the TMO.
Yes, the client and the TMO. You mean RBKC?
I mean RBKC audit and the TMO in terms of their audit programme. And that would have been reported through their audit committee into their board.
Who at the TMO, who at RBKC, let's begin with them, who at RBKC made the decision that although the draft audit programme said fire risk assessments, there wouldn't be one in the end?
It wouldn't have been anybody in the housing department. It would have been because the housing department did not set the audit plan with the TMO, and it would have been a discussion held between RBKC audit and the TMO.
But RBKC audit reports to whom?
In 2012, I couldn't tell you. It was as part of a a separate department. I think probably that was probably sat in the finance overall finance team, but I couldn't swear to it.
Did RBKC audit, when deciding on the scope of audit for any particular year, speak to anybody in your department or departments?
I don't know. I'm not aware that they did.
Did you ever talk to anybody in the audit group or on the audit committee about what should or shouldn't be included in their audit?
No, I did not.
Did anybody who reported to you have any such discussions, to your knowledge?
I don't believe they did, no.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that the RBKC audit group or audit team decided for themselves what should be the subject of audit without consulting, at least in respect to fire assessment, risk assessments, you.
Yes, because they were an independent organisation who would then work with their auditors to review what needed to be in their audit programme, which is entirely in keeping with any organisation managing a housing service.
How do you know how they would have made their decision whether or not to include or exclude something from the scope of their audits without talking to the relevant RBKC department?
Well, they wouldn't need to talk to me. They would need to have a look at when looking at your audit programme, you have a look at areas based on what you think is high risk or what you think deserves external scrutiny because you're wanting to get an audit input on it, or you're looking at areas which haven't been audited for some considerable period of time, and then seeking to understand if there's been any significant changes in the way that particular service is ran, and then you're arriving at a decision agreed between Mr. Black's executive team, I have no doubt, about what was appropriate to have in terms of that audit plan.
Can we look, please, at RBK 50313? This is an internal audit of the TMO's fire risk management system in 2013. It looks, from the face of it, that it is an RBKC document. Is that right? Or is it a TMO document?
It's an RBKC audit document that RBKC had authored for the TMO. So now, where the holder of that sits, once you undertake an audit for an organisation, then it becomes that organisation's audit and you own it, but you have still authored it.
Well, I was going to ask you because we can see, notwithstanding the front page, at the very top of the front page, it says TMO Health and Safety Internal Audit Report 2012 to 2013. So what do you take from that? Was it internal to TMO, or was it about the TMO but internal to RBKC?
It is. I take it that is a report that RBKC Audit had undertaken for the TMO, and so the TMO hadn't audited themselves. This is, as they have badged it, an internal audit report, rather than you can have external auditors come in and do audits of your, say, for example, if you were looking at risk, you might broadly risk in the markets. If you were looking to borrow money, then you would look at external auditors who could provide that service for you. But if you're badging it as an internal audit, it's a phrase to mean about your services internally.
Oh, I see. I think I see. Let's see how we go with this document then. We can see from the first page that the final version was circulated to you and Robert Black. Yes?
If that's what it says, it was.
Well, it does say that. Can we take it that that is what happened?
Yes.
Right. Now, I take it also from that answer that you don't recall receiving this document specifically.
I don't recall receiving this audit specifically in April 2013. But if it was circulated to me, I would have received it.
Yes. Were you involved in commissioning the TMO health and safety audits?
No.
No. Was this audit separate from the annual audit that was suggested in draft that we saw a moment ago on the last document, that the FRA assessment audit? This is a different thing, is it?
It may well have been that there was that draft list of audits, but then actually what took place was something different.
Why would the final version of this have been forwarded to you in particular?
because I received all the audits that were undertaken of TMO services.
I see. Can we look at the executive summary then on page 4? It starts on page 3, but what I want to ask you about is on page 4. If you look at paragraph 9, areas were identified where controls can be improved. 3 high priority recommendations were made as follows. And then the third bullet point is all portable firefighting equipment should be regularly inspected by the appointed contractor. Any faulty equipment identified replaced on a prompt basis. And then underneath that, a number of medium priority recommendations, the first one of which is all high priority remedial work identified as part of the annual health and safety inspection check should be followed up by the health and safety team to ensure that it's undertaken on a prompt basis. Just pausing there, first of all, looking at the high priority ones I've just shown you, did you note that? Did you note those categories?
Yes, I would have done.
And also, you would have noted the 5 medium priority recommendations as well, I imagine.
Yes.
Then if we look at paragraph 11 at the foot of page 4, it says, as a result of the audit review, internal audit can give limited assurance, in bold, that adequate controls and processes are in place for health and safety at the TMO. Whilst there is a basically sound system, there are weaknesses which put some of the system objectives at risk. Taking into account the assurance level given above and the significance of the system, we are of the opinion that the system presents a medium risk to the organisation achieving its overall service objectives. Did it concern you that the audit could only give a limited assurance?
It would have done, and then that would have been raised with Amanda Johnson, who would have discussed that with colleagues at the TMO through monthly meetings. And I believe for a limited assurance report, it probably would have gone, and I would have to check this to be honest with you, that it would have been raised. Well, it definitely would have been raised at the TMO board because they had an audit and risk committee, and then that would have been reported into their board. And then if it was limited assurance to the TMO, it may well have gone to the council's audit committee, but I'm afraid I'd have to check that.
You would have noticed then, had you looked at the 5 medium priority recommendations, that the final one, the 5th, was this: appropriate performance indicators relating to health and safety inspections should be developed by management. Having noted that, what steps do you remember taking yourself to put that in place, put that development in place?
That's not for me to do that, that's for the TMO to do that.
Yes. What steps did you take to scrutinise or oversee the TMOs doing that?
So Amanda Johnson would have discussed that with the TMO as part of her monthly update. And I would have definitely spoken to Robert Black at one of our monthly meetings, which are not minuted, about the outcome of the audit reports and what the TMO were doing. And in fact, I probably wouldn't have needed to speak to him about it because he would have raised that in our meetings about how the TMO were looking to pull that together. So in terms of appropriate performance indicators relating to health and safety, it was my expectation then that the Health and Safety Committee that the TMO had set up would address that point.
Can we please go to section 8 of this document, which starts on page 18? And on that page you can see paragraph 8 or section 8, fire safety. You see that?
Yes.
And if you turn the page, please, to paragraph 8.3 on page 19, you can see that the report says, audit examined 3 fire risk assessment reports as follows: Dacre House, January 2013, 31 Danvers Street, November 2012, Downing House, April 2012. The properties that are listed there, do you know how they were selected?
No.
Of course, none of them are Grenfell Tower. None of them is Grenfell Tower. Were you aware that in reviewing just 3 fire risk assessments, that this audit didn't purport to be a comprehensive review of the TMO's fire risk management system?
That would have been a decision for our internal auditors to take.
Right. You don't know how they selected those 3 fire risk assessments?
I don't know how they selected them, and I don't know upon which basis they decided what a comprehensive review of fire risk assessments was.
Did you ask? Did you
No,
investigate?
I did not.
Did you ever ask or investigate the possibility of any comprehensive review of TMO's fire risk assessments processes being carried out?
No, I did not.
Why is that?
I read the audit report and would have seen that they had done that, and then I knew that the TMO would take action against that, but it did not, for me, set flags raising that I should request something more significant.
Did you have any advice available to you to tell you that these 3 properties were a fairly representative sample for the purposes of the audit?
No.
Would you have assumed that the auditors would have satisfied themselves that these were a fairly representative sample?
I would assume that audit, in terms of how they undertake their job, would be qualified auditors who would seek to reassure themselves that they undertook their job in a way that was commensurate with their profession. So yes, I would presume that
yes.
audit.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Can we look at section 9 then, at page 20, please? This is entitled Management Information and Budgetary Control. And if we go, please, to page 20, paragraph 9.4 over the page, page 21, it says there, in the absence of a full range of performance indicators for health and safety specific areas, there's a risk that management cannot monitor performance levels for these areas and take appropriate corrective action where poor or inadequate performance levels are identified. Recommendation, and you can see that in bold, appropriate performance indicators relating to health and safety inspections should be developed by management. This ensures that inspections can be monitored and any performance issues identified for appropriate corrective action to be taken where performance does not meet expectations. I'm assuming you read that and understood it when you saw it.
Yes.
Yes. Did you follow up with the TMO on this recommendation?
I don't remember personally following up on this recommendation, but in terms of audit, it would be my understanding that the TMO would receive the audit report and then put together a plan which addressed the recommendations set out in the audit report, and then in case of limited assurance, a further audit report would probably be undertaken 6 months later, which would seek to find out whether those audit recommendations had been undertaken.
So you say that the TMO would receive the audit report and then put together a plan.
Yes.
Was it not RBKC's role to make sure that the TMO did that rather than just leaving it to them to do it?
No, we would assume that the TMO, as an organisation with the correct structure in place, would take the audit recommendations and put together a plan. And we would then see evidence of the follow-up audit report that had taken place to see that it would that the actions had been undertaken.
Well, that was my question, really. You say you say we would then see evidence of the follow-up audit report that had taken place. Was that the way in which you, as RBKC, sought to make sure that this recommendation was undertaken, put into practice by the TMO?
So that was one element. Amanda Johnson had monthly meetings with the TMO to discuss performance, where key performance indicators were discussed, and there was a standard agenda. And I also saw minutes of the board meetings where I knew that audit, and there was an audit and risk committee, but I didn't see minutes of those unless they were included in the board papers. I can't remember. And items relating to health and safety would be addressed by the board, and I would be able to see evidence of the fact that those had been addressed at board level with the TMO. Right.
And would the same go for what is indicated in the management response just below that, where it says it's been acknowledged that it would be beneficial for the TMO to supplement this with meaningful health and safety key performance indicators, which could be monitored regularly throughout the year?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Were you aware that a suite of performance indicators, including fire safety, specifically were not actually introduced by the TMO until January 2016.
No, I wasn't aware that there was a suite of those suite of KPIs, but they did introduce performance. They did introduce more performance indicators for health and safety. I'm absolutely sure that they wasn't left for another 3 years before they were introduced.
Right. Well, a follow-up. Do you remember that there was a follow-up audit? You referred to follow-up audit.
Yes.
There was one, in fact, for this.
I'm sure there
done
was.
in December 2013. And let's just look at that. RBK 50320. You say you're sure there was. When we look at it, we see that, and there it is, it's not actually circulated to you in draft or final, as you see. It appears only to go to TMO people. Why is that?
I don't know.
Was that odd? I mean, would you not have expected to see a follow-up audit?
I would have expected to. All audit reports were sent to me as a matter of course, and I'm not sure why a follow-up audit was not sent to me as well.
You see, you said earlier on, just a moment ago, that the TMO, you would have expected to take the audit recommendations, put together a plan, and then you would see evidence of the follow-up audit report had taken place to see that the actions have been undertaken, and that's one of the ways in which which RBKC kept tabs on TMOs doing what the audit said they should do. Do you see?
Yes.
Now, my question is, if that's the case, why are you not circulated with this document?
I don't know. You'd have to ask RBKC Audit.
Right. Well, let me ask you, did you ever notice that notwithstanding the recommendations and the management's response in the previous document, which we've seen, that you never actually got a follow-up audit?
I didn't in this instance.
You didn't, but you didn't. Did you not notice? Did you not ask yourself, I wonder where the follow-up audit is?
Clearly, I didn't notice 6 months later that I hadn't received a follow-up audit report. So in an ideal world, I would have diarised it that I was expecting to see an audit report some months later, but I didn't, and so I didn't follow it up.
But was it not important for you to make sure that you could, by the follow-up audit approach, make sure that the TMO was doing what the auditor said they should do?
Yes, clearly, and in this instance, I haven't received the report, and I haven't remembered to chase it up.
Did you actually notice that you hadn't had the follow-up report? Do you remember?
I don't remember, to be honest. Well, clearly, if I had, I would have chased it up. So clearly, I didn't know. I didn't remember.
Right. And I'm assuming, well, you didn't receive it. You didn't read it. Is today the first time you've ever seen this document?
I don't know. I can only look at the front page.
Well, I can.
I may have seen it in the course of events, but I.
Well, let's just look at page 2 then. See if I can help you a bit more. It says on the first page in paragraph 1, in accordance with our protocol to review the implementation of limited assurance audits, we've performed a follow-up audit of our April 2013 report on health and safety at TMO. Now, just pausing there, it looks from that as if the TMO understood, or the auditors understood, that they would only produce a follow-up audit where there was a limited assurance audit. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Right. But that still doesn't explain why you didn't see this document.
That's correct.
No. And then you can see paragraph 2 is the reference to the internal audit producing a limited assurance. And then in this follow-up audit, we report that satisfactory progress has been made with the implementation of the recommendations. The current status of each recommendation is given in more detail in Appendix 1 to this report. And that paragraph 5, you see that they say that we now provide a satisfactory assurance of medium risk. And having shown you that, when was the first time you think you saw this document?
I think this may have been the first time I've seen this document.
All right. So you wouldn't, and I'll show you paragraph 23, sorry, page 23, if I I'm so sorry, that's in fact, I don't need to show you that, and indeed can't, because there is no page 23 in this document. Did anybody report to you that there had been an upgrade from limited to satisfactory at this time?
I don't remember in December of 2013 anybody saying to me that there had been an upgrade in the audit, but it would have been noted in the 6-monthly or annual performance report.
Now, can I then turn, please, to the notice of deficiency, which the LFB provided served on in November 2016 in relation to Grenfell Tower. You deal with this at paragraph 131 of your statement, your first statement. Can we go to that, please, at page 34? And you say there, the TMO notified me of the deficiency notice by email. The TMO sought to rectify these issues and measures were in the process of being undertaken that had been highlighted to them. My understanding is that they had informed the LFB. When did the TMO notify you by email, do you think?
By an email of receipt of the deficiency notice?
Yes.
I don't know, but on occasion, LFB would sometimes send the deficiency notices to the TMO and RBKC, and sometimes they would just send them to RBKC, and sometimes they just send them to the TMO, because I think, like most people, found it difficult to really understand what the role of RBKC and TMO was. It was a non-standard. In terms of whether you transferred your stock and had a housing association or whether you had an ALMO. So on occasions, they came to different organisations. In this case, clearly the deficiency notice has gone straight to the TMO, and I knew about it, but I can't remember in exact detail when I received that email.
Right. You talk in that answer of deficiency notices because I asked you about deficiency notices. Would the same apply to enforcement notices?
Yes.
Can we please look at paragraph 130 of your statement, just above where we've been looking? And you say, in that paragraph, in the third from bottom line, councillors would have no involvement in managing the response to a deficiency notice. I would have let the Cabinet member know about a deficiency notice and any action taken in respect of it as a matter of course. Now, what you say there relates to councillors. Was the same also the case for council officers or employees?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand your question.
Well, you say councillors would have no involvement in managing the response to a deficiency notice. Well, what about officers or employees?
Probably not, because the items that the LFB would be listed would be the items that were items that the TMO were responsible for.
Right, but in a case where a deficiency notice came to RBKC, you say councillors would have no involvement. Is the same also true of RBKC staff?
I think we're slightly talking at cross purposes, because I'm talking about very practical things about meeting the requirements of the deficiency notice, like moving bikes out of hallways and electric wheelchairs. And I believe you're trying to say to me in terms of monitoring of the deficiency notice. Am I correct?
No. Well, let's look at your statement. It says councillors would have no involvement in managing the response to a deficiency notice. You refer to councillors. My question is whether that went wider. Would it also include RBKC staff?
Yes, I can say RBKC staff would not, in the normal course of events, have any involvement in the response to the deficiency notice.
Yes. And a little bit above that, you say, if the TMO required additional finance in order to be able to comply with the deficiency notice, depending on the scope and cost of the work, usually it would be managed within the existing budget provision. If not, it would be referred to Cabinet for extra funding. Was work in respect of any item in the November deficiency notice, the 2016 deficiency notice, referred to Cabinet for extra funding?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Do you know how often the TMO sought additional funding in order to comply with LFB deficiency notices?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, no. But I don't believe I can't remember an instance of the TMO coming to the council and asking for additional funds that would require a cabinet decision.
Is that also true in respect of funding FRA actions more generally?
If you were looking at the budget for the following year, then we would hopefully make provision within that budget, looking at the annual programme in terms of the capital and revenue budget, to make sufficient funds available for FRA actions as they were projected. And if something came up in the year that was unexpected, then we had quarterly review meetings, quarterly reports undertaken on the monitoring of the capital and revenue programme in order to be able to understand how the TMO were performing against that budget, and if there needed to be any movement of budget within that, then it would be dealt with on those occasions.
Yes, I understand. Going back then to where you say if the TMO required additional finance in order to be able to comply with the deficiency notice, usually it would be managed within the existing budget provision. Was there ever an occasion, to your knowledge, when the TMO did come asking for additional finance in order to be able to comply with the deficiency notice?
Only on the occasion, from recollection, when they received a notice about Adair Tower. No, they didn't need additional. I don't believe they did need additional funding as a result of Adair Tower. So I believe that was managed within the existing budget provision.
So what event are you referring to there in that sentence?
I'm not referring to any particular event. I'm just making a general comment.
Well, you say we've read it now twice. You say if the TMO required additional finance, etc., usually it would be managed within the existing budget provision. I'm really just asking you to provide me with an instance in which the TMO required such additional finance, such that it was managed within the existing budget provision. Was there such an occasion?
I can't think of one.
Why were you able, or how were you able to write that sentence?
Well, I must say, I read this as you describing the system. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. I'm making a general description of how it worked.
Very well. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
I think it is, actually, Mr. Miller. Yes, thank you very much. We're going to have a break now, Ms. Johnson. We'll come back at 25 to 4, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right? Thank you very much.
Usually.
25 to 4 then, please. Yeah. Would you ask Ms Johnson to come back in, please? All right, Ms Johnson?
Yes.
When you're ready, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johnson, can I ask you please to go to your first witness statement and look at paragraph 127, which is at page 33. And this lies under the heading Deficiency Notice relating to Grenfell Tower. And you say, a deficiency notice was issued by LFB in November 2016 with compliance due by 18th May 2017. The LFB undertook an inspection of Grenfell Tower in November 2016, at which point a deficiency notice was served based on their observations at the time, LJ 46. These were, and then you set out 5 of them. You see that there. Did the TMO provide you with details of any actions that it intended to take, or intended to be taken with with these breaches to remedy them?
I don't remember a conversation in between November 2016 and when there was response in May 2018, but I would have definitely spoken to Robert Black about it in one of our monthly one-to-one meetings, if not had a conversation with Janice Ray about how they were proposing to address the deficiency notice.
Did you actually read the deficiency notice yourself at the time?
Yes, I would have done, yes.
And you summarised it there, as I've shown you. Looking specifically at number 2, 2 flat entrances were identified as not self-closing. In fact, did you appreciate at the time that the issue that was identified was also one of maintenance of flat entrance doors?
No, I don't think I appreciated that at the time.
Right. Can we just look at then at the deficiency notice? It's TMO 1001513, and let's just look at page 5 in that. There's the schedule of fire safety audit observations, and if you go to the foot of page 5, Article 17(1), it says in the 5th line down, after the reference to protected route, this route should provide a safe means of escape in the event of fire and must be maintained in an efficient state, in efficient working order and good repair. Did you notice that when you...
Yes, I would have done.
You did. Can we then go back to your witness statement, please, at page 34, and look at paragraph 130, a little bit lower down the page. And you say, the council effectively placed its trust in the TMO, that the deficiency notice would be dealt with appropriately and followed up with the LFB. If the TMO required additional finance, etc., etc., we've seen that before. And then in the last sentence, you say that you would have let the cabinet member know about a deficiency notice and any action taken in respect of it as a matter of course. Do you remember when you reported the deficiency notice and actions to the cabinet member?
No, I don't.
Who was the cabinet member?
Councillor Fielding Mellon.
How would you have been able to detail the action taken without the information coming from the TMO?
Because the TMO would give me a copy of their response to the deficiency notice, which would contain the information which set out how they responded to the LFB.
Right. Were you aware of what process the TMO adopted to monitor and action deficiency notices generally?
I wasn't, not as a... they didn't receive that many deficiency notices, so you would receive one from the TMO would receive one from the LFB, and then they would notify RBKC, and then the team within the TMO would, I'm not sure what the process or procedure was, would then take action in order to be able to rectify the actions in the deficiency notice, and then would hold a conversation with the LFB in order to ensure that they were adequately meeting the requirements of the notice.
Did you know that actions were not monitored by the TMO in the same way that they managed their FRA actions? In other words, the monitoring of actions in response to deficiency or enforcement notices wasn't the same process as that being used to monitor the closing out of FRA actions arising from FRAs.
No, I don't believe I did.
Right. Do you know why there was that distinction?
No.
You don't?
Well, I can guess.
No, don't guess.
Okay.
You said you didn't know about it. You didn't know about it. Is it something you should have known about?
No, not necessarily.
Why is that?
Because I didn't necessarily know the detail of all the processes and the procedures that the TMO undertook in order to be able to meet the requirements, So I didn't necessarily need to know the specifics of how the TMO undertook meeting the requirements of the deficiency notice.
Was that also something that was too you would have regarded or did regard as too granular for you to?
Yes, that would be a level of detail that I wouldn't expect to be copied into. And because each deficiency notice is different, then I should imagine that the TMO's response would have to be changed according to the deficiency notice.
Do you remember ever raising the question with the TMO about what their system for dealing with deficiency or enforcement notices was?
No, I did not.
Do you know why that is?
No. Well, I didn't raise it with them because my experience of them dealing with deficiency notices was that they notified me, they kept me informed of what was taking place in terms of the response to the LFB, and then I was copied into the final notice that went to the LFB, and or if they needed an extension of time from the LFB in order to meet the deficiency notice, they notified me of that.
Right, so we can take it from that answer that dealing with deficiency notices was not a scrutiny or monitoring point for RBKC.
No, it was not.
Now, if we go back to paragraph, back to your statement, but look at paragraph 129, please. You say on the same page, well, we've now gone to the previous page, back to that page. You say on page 34 that you knew that the LFB set out what they required the organisation to rectify and by when. This is in the penultimate line there. You see that?
Yes.
And then you say once that had been done, a notice would be sent to the LFB informing them that it had been complied with. Did you or anybody else at RBKC take note of the recommended completion dates in the deficiency notices?
I don't remember specifically taking a note of when the deficiency notices would be complied with, but it was custom and practice for the LFB normally to give 6 months in order for a deficiency notice to be completed by.
I see. So you were working, on the basis of an assumption that it was a 6-month cure period?
I was working on that assumption based on my experience of previous deficiency notice that that had been served.
Did you or anybody else at RBKC ever check on whether the TMO had rectified the deficiencies by the deadlines set out?
The TMO let us know that they had done that, and as far as I'm aware, they did not. Sorry, I'm getting quite tired. They did not ever go. They always went back to the LFB within the time period, or if there was a reason for the delay, then the TMO went back to the LFB to explain why and seek an extension.
Right. It would have been simple, wouldn't it, for RBKC easily to monitor whether the deadline had been met or not?
It would have been quite a simple procedure, yes.
Can you explain why?
I didn't need to put that in place because I had always been kept up to date by the TMO about the responses to the deficiency notices. So it wasn't an issue of concern to me that they wouldn't keep me updated.
Standing back, was it not important to the overall fire safety of the residents within the TMO stock that RBKC's housing and the housing portfolio more generally to ensure that these actions were carried out?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Not least because the purpose of FRAs and enforcement of those through the deficiency process was to ensure compliance with the RRO.
Yes.
Now, in paragraph 131 on the same page, you'll see you say, the TMO notified me of the deficiency notice by email. The TMO sought to rectify these issues and measures were in the process of being undertaken that had been highlighted to them. the TMO, my understanding is that they informed the LFB, and I've read that to you, I think, twice. How did you know that the TMO had sought to rectify the issues?
They would have either sent me an email to let me know that that's what they were doing, or I would have had a discussion with Mr. Black, who would have kept me up to date on it, or I would have spoken about it to Janice Ray, or she may have sent me an email about that.
So, is this right, that although you wouldn't have been involved at all in the process of monitoring closeout of FRA actions, you were personally involved directly, together perhaps with Robert Black, in relation to a deficiency notice?
It was of sufficient concern to me. I'm afraid I can't speak for Amanda Johnson about what her role was in relation to deficiency notices. That if I was notified of it, that it was dealt with in a timely manner, and I did know about them, and I knew the timescale with which they needed to be replied by, and I would know that, and then would be sort of keeping an eye on it, so to say.
Did the receipt of a deficiency notice not alert you to the fact that something might be wrong with the TMO's closeout process?
Not necessarily, because deficiency notices, they hadn't received very many deficiency notices in my time as Director of Housing over 8.5 years. To my knowledge, it must have been a very small number. And deficiency notices, although not being served regularly, can be served for a range of issues after the LFB have undertaken an inspection of a building. And it didn't necessarily flag to me that there was a wholesale problem with the way the TMO managed fire risk assessments. It was something that the fire brigade had noticed when undertaking an inspection of a building.
Now, you say that it was your understanding that the TMO had told the LFB that the processes were undertaken. Were you actually informed by the TMO that the deficiencies identified by the LFB had actually been rectified?
In this instance, I can't remember, to be honest with you.
Were you aware that by the night of the fire at Grenfell Tower, 14th of June 2017, one of the flat entrance doors identified as not self-closing by the LFB in this very deficiency notice was still not working?
No, I was not.
Several months later?
No, I was not aware of that.
Were you ever provided, or was RBKC provided with confirmation that the LFB had been informed that the deficiencies had been or were being rectified?
I would as a normal course of events, but I don't remember in this instance, and I haven't seen any documentation, to my knowledge, about the response by TMO to the LFB on this particular deficiency notice.
What was the source of your understanding that the TMO had informed the LFB that the deficiencies had been rectified?
Because the TMO met with the LFB every 2 months to talk about issues of fire safety. So it would be my understanding that they would have discussed the deficiency notice at one of those meetings. And or because in my experience, the TMO had always responded to deficiency notices in the past, that it would be custom and practice for them to have been responded to the LFB on this deficiency notice.
I see. So when you say my understanding, you really mean my assumption?
I do.
Unverified?
Correct, yes. But unless I have documentary evidence to prove otherwise, I don't remember seeing the response, but that would have been my unverified understanding.
My question really, which follows from that, is why did you have to make an assumption? Why could you not verify your assumption by investigation?
At the time of writing this statement?
No, at the time of the deadline for curing the deficiency.
If I'd wanted to, and I could have gone back to Janice Ray and asked her for a copy of the notice, their response to the LFB.
Yes, why didn't you do that?
It must have... it's unaccountable to me that I didn't go back to Janice at that point, because I did take deficiency notices extremely seriously, but clearly I didn't in this instance.
Thank you. I'm now going to move to what may appear to be a different topic, but perhaps may not be, which is fire doors and self-closing devices. Do you remember discussions between RBKC and the TMO in 2016 and the early part of 2017 about the installation programme for self-closing devices on flat front doors in the TMO stock?
Yes, I do.
And about the possibility of an annual inspection programme for self-closing devices?
Yes, I do.
Did those discussions come about as a result of the Adair Tower fire in October 2015?
Yes, they did.
And then there were discussions and a deficiency notice, wasn't there?
Yes, there was, yes.
Yeah. Now, let's look at TMO 00840502, please. This is a set of minutes of a TMO executive team meeting which took place on the 11th of February 2016. So some 3 months after the Adair Tower fire. You can see who was present, Robert Black, etc. And if you look at page 2 there, please, you can look at point 3 in the minutes. And it says, Adair Tower and enforcement notice update. And in the second paragraph there, it says, FOLA, saying that the board will want reassurance from RBKC, seen by Laura and Nicholas Holgate and the fire brigade, happy with everything, protected roof is the smoke test, Robert and Barbara want clarity from the strategic part of the fire brigade, RBKC don't want to do this work if not required, FOLA, reputation of RBKC and TMO, everything to be addressed, board may say a lot in the press about fires, our fire risk assessments are all okay, RBKC a key partner, and we do what they want. Paper at next board meeting will be in the open section. Now, we preface this question, first of all, by the obvious observation, you weren't there, you didn't draft these minutes. My question is really this. When it says RBKC don't want to do this work if not required, are you able to tell us whether you expressed any reluctance to pay for the work required, which had resulted from the Adair Tower enforcement notices?
I would have expressed not a desire not to pay for it, but an understanding of how we were to pay for it in the course of the HRA business plan. So I would have questioned what the budget for it was, where we were to find the budget from, and how we were to meet those budget requirements from the available resources.
Yes. Can you explain how whoever wrote this minute, or whoever said what they said at this meeting, assuming this minute to be accurate, came to the understanding that RBKC don't want to do this work if not required?
So all I can say is that they're probably expressing a shorthand of a conversation which would have involved myself, which said, do we need to do this to meet the enforcement notice served by RBKC? If we don't have to do it, then can we leave this? If we do have to do it, then we will take that forward.
Right. And the part that says RBKC a key partner and we do what they want, was that correct?
Well, to a certain degree, but if the TMO contained the expertise on a whole range of areas which I have no qualification or expertise on. So if they had said to me, no, we definitely want to do this and this needs doing, then I would have taken their advice.
Now, an executive team meeting of the TMO took place on the 5th of October 2016, so later in the year. TMO 00843-861, please. This is the minute. This is the first page of the minute. You can see the date, 5th of October 2016. You can see who was present there. And if we go, please, to page 2, we can see that Adair Tower is item 3 in this minute. At 3.2, it says, LFB are putting pressure on us to fit door closers on all our stock across the business. Laura Johnson has said no to this, but Sasha feels that there should be a discussion at ET. The fire strategy is being updated with the recommendation that this work is done over a 5-year period, although it is likely that the LFB will expect a shorter period. Sasha will speak to her team about doing some profiling on this, as with 9,000 properties we would need to know the estimated cost for this, and also what others are doing. RBKC would need to be spoken to about this and given options. Where it says Laura Johnson had said no to this, but Sasha feels that there should be a discussion at ET, did you say no to fitting self-closing devices on all doors?
I didn't say no. I said I received a report from I asked for a report from the TMO about the requirement to fit self-closing doors. And I asked for that specifically because we had a programme of fitting fire doors over the course of 2011 to 2015 and had been in constant conversation with the LFB about the doors and about leaseholders and about the difficulty of enforcing the fitting of the fire doors, particularly on leaseholder properties. And it had taken us years in order to be able to fulfil that programme. And I just knew how long it took in order to be able to, in a stock of 9,500 properties with 2,500 leaseholders, how long it actually took in reality for us to do that. So I asked for a report about what the requirement was for door closers to be fitted, and the report came back and set out that they thought the door closer programme should be done over 3 years, and I pushed back and said, well, could we push it to 5 years, please? And the TMO said, we think the LFB will want it to be done quicker than that. I understood that recommendation, and it was my expectation that we would set 5 years, but it would probably have to come down to a shorter period of time. But what I didn't want to do was set the TMO up to fail, because I really wanted to understand the legal basis upon which door closers needed to be fitted, bearing in mind that we had had conversations with LFB about doors for years and years and years, and this issue had never been raised, and it was only being raised now in 2016. And I, if I'm honest with you, I was quite cross that we had been undertaken this massive exercise around doors, and it was only now that we were having to come back again and revisit this particular issue, when we could have done it at the same time that we had the refitting the door programme and undertaking all of those exercises with the leaseholders, because we'd have to come back again and do it again. And the issue of where the demise of the door sat with leaseholders is really not straightforward, and neither is the issue of how you can take legal action in order to enforce it. It is not straightforward. So knowing very clearly that that it took 3 years, maybe longer, in order to sort out 130 doors, leaseholder doors, and 1,200 tenanted doors, it was of my opinion that actually we needed to spread this programme out over a longer period, just in order for it to be able to be a success. Because actually getting in and fitting those door closers, particularly to leaseholder doors, was going to be extremely difficult and very time consuming.
Yes, now we're going to look at much of what you've just told us in what I'm afraid was rather a long answer. My question was a simpler one. Did you say no, as recorded here?
No, I didn't say no.
Now, go to RBK 3048317. The matter of door closure was raised in this document, which is an executive decision report. And we can see it's for the full cabinet, dated 12th January 2017. Reporting officer Laura Johnson, Director of Housing. Key decision, yes. Just pausing there, what was your role in writing this report?
I probably didn't write the report. It was probably written by Steve Muller. But I would have checked it and agreed to it.
Yes, and your name is on page 3.
Yes,
so
correct.
Usual process. If we look at page 15 in this document, please, and specifically paragraph 13 on that page, fire safety requirements, paragraph 13.1, the fire at Adair Tower in October 2015 resulted in the London Fire Brigade, LFB, issuing enforcement notices for Adair and Hazelwood Towers. The key recommendations required the installation of self-closing devices on flat entrance doors, fire action notices installed on all floors, and works to ensure the staircases will remain safe and smoke-free in the event of a fire. In the course of the recent regular audits carried out, The LFB is now issuing a deficiency notices, citing as further actions required the installation of self-closing devices on flat entrance doors and the posting of fire actions notices, as the LFB had expected the council, through the TMO, to put in place a programme of self-closing devices on flat entrance doors across all the council's housing stock. The TMO has assessed the cost to complete this programme over a 3-year period to be £620,000, with a further £2,500 to complete the installation of fire action notices. The LFB also expect there to be regular inspection of the self-closing devices to ensure they remain properly in place and active. However, it should be noted, this is para 13.2, however, it should be noted that there are significant challenges facing the delivery of these works in the context of the current leases. Legal advice is being sought to establish the practical implications of completing these works to all homes, tenanted and leasehold, and ensuring that the closures stay in place. Now, I've read you that at length. Did the executive come to any decision about these matters in 2017? January 2017.
There was a decision taken to do the programme over 5 years in order, in part, to spread the cost of the £620,000 over that period and to take into account the very practical realities of being able to undertake the programme in a 3-year period. But it was my expectation, I have to say at this time, that we would be challenged on that by the LFB and that we would have to shorten that programme again.
Right. Now, you may not have heard me qualify the question. January 2017. Was a decision taken by Cabinet at that stage?
Yes, it would have been, yeah.
Right. Can we look then at an email chain later in the same month, 25th of January 2017, at RBK401038? If we start, please, in the email run at page 2, if we go to page 2, we see that this is Janice Ray writing to Robert Black on the 25th of January 2017. And I don't believe you're copied in on it. The subject is Adair Tower letter from LFB. Please find attached letter received yesterday from the LFB confirming that the work specified in the enforcement notice has been satisfactorily completed within the specified time limit. LFB have confirmed that they will be sending a similar letter in relation to Hazelwood Tower, and I will forward a copy of this when we receive it. Now, if we move up then, please, to the next document at page 1, we can see that Robert Black sends this to you for information on the same day, the foot of page 1. He says, Laura, for information, somewhere it might be good to meet to look at how we respond to the fire brigade, as I think we are being driven down a road by a group which seems to be unaccountable. Is the overall responsibility for this moving to the mayor? Might give us and LA political leaders to influence this area more. Do you remember receiving that email?
Yes.
Did you discuss its contents with Mr. Black?
I would have done.
Did you discuss its contents with any councillors?
I don't remember.
Did you discuss its contents with Nick Paget-Brown, the leader?
I wouldn't have expected I would have. No.
Did you take any steps to discuss the substance of the notice with the LFB?
No.
Did you consider Mr. Black's suggestion here regarding political influence to be appropriate?
Yes.
You did?
Well, he's asking a question for me to have a conversation about it and to go back and talk to political leaders whether there's an opportunity to influence a decision on this subject. I don't consider that an inappropriate email for Mr. Black to send to me. He's just asking a question, posing a question, making a statement, you know.
He is, and we can see your response at the top of the page. You go back to him, same day, an hour or so later, and you say, Robert, I don't think it's moving to the mayor, but I'm not entirely sighted on what's happening on this. Brian Castle used to go to the Borough /LFB liaison meetings for London councils, but he's retired and we haven't got a new rep. I think you're right that they're unaccountable and hard, if not impossible, to challenge as they make unilateral statements which are non-negotiable. However, on the bright side, this has now been signed off, which is very welcome. Did you regard the LFB's enforcement of your obligations under the RRO or the TMO's obligations under the RRO as negotiable?
Not negotiable in terms of deficiency or notices, but there's a distinction here to be drawn between the fitting of door closers and door closers being put in place, and then the question of undertaking annual checks on door closers. So the LFB had asked us to do that, but I wasn't clear at that time, and neither was, I don't want to speak for Robert Black, but I don't think he was either, whether it was just the LFB asking RBKC to undertake that programme, whether it was going to be a London-wide programme, or whether it was going to be a national programme that was going to be put in place for an annual check of door closers, because it wasn't currently part of our suite of compliance checks that we undertook. And I didn't understand it, I can't speak for anyone else, it to be something that was undertaken as routine by other local authorities and or housing associations.
What did you want to be negotiable?
I wanted to understand from the LFB whether there was any movement on that annual checking, and was this something that we had to do? Was this now a statutory requirement? Was this a requirement under the RRO? And that's where we were seeking to get further legal advice on it, because it's quite it's not only a very big undertaking to fit door closers to 9,500 properties, of which 2,500 are leaseholders, but it's also a considerable undertaking to then have a checking programme in place, which is equivalent to LGSR checks, so gas safety checks, which have to be undertaken every 12 months. With LGSR checks, there's a considerable amount of statutory basis for that, and the ability to take legal action in order to be able to enforce against that. That's not the same for the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, nor was it clear to me that on what basis legally we had to do this.
You could challenge the LFB's decision in court, couldn't you?
Yes, I suppose we could have done.
So why would you want to negotiate over it? You could just challenge it if you thought it was wrong.
Well, going to court is an expensive business, and it's often better to reach a decision through one of conversation and or discussion, and particularly with this particular item. As I reference here, that we have I was chair at the time of London Council's, and we had an LFB liaison meeting, which was really, really useful for teasing out those London-wide issues that, kind of we wanted to discuss.
Well, London-wide or otherwise, did you realise that the LGA guidance, which had been published by the DCLG in 2011 in the wake of Blacknell House, required the installation and maintenance of working door closers in blocks such as Grenfell Tower?
I would have read it, but I didn't remember it at this time, because I was, sort of cognizant of the factor around door closers. It wasn't door closers per se; it was the having an annual checking programme that I was seeking information on.
Right, and it looks as if Mr. Black, who no doubt will speak to this document, was suggesting that some sort of political solution might be found to this, rather than simply complying with the legal obligations mandated by Parliament.
He was suggesting that there may be some way to discuss with the LFB that, but there's a difference between having a door closers in place and maintaining them, and then having a programme that checks them every year. And there's a distinction to be made there. Because you could have a boiler in a property and you could have fitted it and it could have been correct, but it's a whole different category to say that you then have to do it you then have to check that boiler on an annual basis, and that is the same for door closers. And as I understand it, although it is set out in the RRO that this is a requirement to have this, the actual mandating of having a checking programme won't actually be in place until the new fire safety bill comes into place.
Can we go to RBK 3014072, please? This is a joint management team meeting minute of the 1st of March 2017, at which you are present, as you can see, as is Amanda Johnson and others, from RBKC, and from TMO we can see Robert Black and others as well, including Peter Madison. It's marked draft, but if you, it's the version that was emailed along with the Joint Management Team agenda for the June 2017 meeting. So as far as we can tell, it's the final version. Can we look at page 2, please? Point 5. At the bottom it says, under the heading, installation of self-closer doors and annual inspection, so 2 things there, will be a huge cost if want to do this. Nobody has an inspection process at present, as it's not a legal requirement to have yearly checks. Could be an option to include in the fire strategy. Need to develop a programme and take to scrutiny. Liability if the doors are broken would be with the TMO. Laura agreed to hold off recommending inspections programme at present. Now, is it correct that it was decided at this meeting that the proposed installation of self-closing devices was to be a 5-year programme, not a 3-year programme?
It doesn't say that. But there is... I don't know whether it was decided at this meeting, but I had a follow-up meeting with Barbara, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her surname. Matthews, where we discussed door closer programme, and she confirmed in a follow-up email to me that we'd discussed 3 years, and I'd said, could we spread this out to 5 years? And then she had confirmed that that discussion.
And that would include that isn't just the annual inspection; it's the installation, isn't it?
That was about looking at the installation programme in order to make it realistic for us to be able to do it in the timescales required, based on my experience of how long it took for us to do the door programme previously between 2011 to something like 2014-15. Right.
And you've already explained to us your view about the proposal to hold annual inspections of the self-closing devices in your long answer earlier. But can we identify this date, this meeting, as the moment when it was decided, as between RBKC and the TMO, not to have an inspection programme?
Not to have an inspection programme subject to further legal advice, because we were in the process of I asked for further legal advice about what the requirement was for the annual inspection programme, and I also said that I wanted to take it up with through the London Council's Fire Safety Group to understand if that was a requirement across London or across nationally, and that I also said in other emails that I would, I suppose, push back on that, because I wanted to have a better understanding of what the industry standard was for that.
Right, so do we take it that you were effectively looking to see whether you could challenge the LFB's requirement?
Challenge, but also clarify, because if I found out that the LFB and or nationally this was a standard procedure, and I didn't know that it was, but if it was, then I would have come back and gone, actually, this is something that everybody is doing. This is in place. We just don't know about it. This is what we need to do. Crack on. But if it was just a request from the specific, specifically to the TMO, then I would have gone back and challenged and said, why is our organisation being asked to do an annual checking programme, but nobody else is?
So you suspected that you were being singled out for special treatment, as it were?
No, I didn't think I was being singled. I didn't think we were being singled out for special treatment. But the policy, as I understood it, the policy unit across the LFB didn't necessarily say the same thing to every single borough, and so I was seeking to qualify whether this was going to be a requirement across London. And then I really wanted to also understand exactly under what legal how we would take action against people legally if they didn't comply with this, because based on my experience of the door replacement programme, it had been somewhat legally confused about how we took action in order to enforce leaseholders to replace the doors.
Yeah, I mean, that's all very well in one sense, but of course this had all arisen because there had been an actual fire in an actual building,
yes,
actually managed by the TMO.
Yes.
Did that fact not have a bearing on why it might very well be that the LFB were taking the steps that they wanted you to take?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I can say that the enforcement notice that the LFB said did ask us to do door closers, which the TMO did put in place, and that's all I can say.
Did the fact of the fire at Adair Tower at the end of October 2015 not indicate something to you that the programme that you'd put in place and had operated for the previous years wasn't fully effective, at least so far as ensuring fire safety of the occupants of that building were concerned?
The fire at Adair Tower was arson, and the fire was contained. It was compartmentalisation worked in that particular instance, and that was in a large part due to the fact that we had, I believe, undertaken the door programme, and so there would have been a correctly rated door fitted to that property.
Can you explain then why the fire was the trigger for the enforcement notice then?
Because the LFB inspected the building after the fire and then sent an enforcement notice after that.
Yeah, because they had found the fire safety systems in the building seriously deficient.
But the LFB had also undertaken an inspection of the Adair Tower prior to the fire, and I believe they and didn't find that, but they did find it after the fire. And that's I would fully expect that, really, because you wouldn't necessarily understand how the smoke would travel or how a fire would behave in a building until it had actually happened.
Do you remember reading the paper that had been prepared for this meeting by Janice Ray on this topic?
The report that I'd requested on that, yes, I do.
Yeah, RBK 500988, if we can just look at that. This is a document identifying itself as JMT 1st March 2017, installation of self-closing devices on flat entrance doors for discussion. Is that the report?
Yes, it is.
Did that paper provide the basis for the discussion at the meeting?
Yes, it would have done.
And the decision that appears to have been taken?
Yes, it does.
Now, it refers, if you go to the middle of page 2, to the two recently received LFB deficiency notices. As you can see there, 3 paragraphs down, one related to Barrington Walk and another related to 9 Colville Square. And then underneath that, in the penultimate paragraph, it says this: the final 2 deficiency notices. I'm so sorry, I should have started earlier on. Look at the second paragraph. It says, since the fire at Adair Tower, the TMO have received 9 deficiency notices. 5 of the 9 notices were issued in relation to different staircases at the same block, Balfour House. And then the next paragraph is the one I've referred to, Barrington Walk. Then there's Colville Square. And then it says this: the final 2 deficiency notices, both received in recent months, include reference to self-closing devices in their schedule of deficiencies and require installation and or maintenance of self-closing device, specifically Lonsdale House, Portobello Court Estate, and Grenfell Tower, Lancaster West Estate. It's, quote, several doors checked at time audit did not self-close. At both these locations, all tenanted flat doors had been replaced with fully compliant self-closing fire-rated door sets in 2013 to 14. Were you surprised that 2 blocks, which had had their doors replaced in the previous 5 years, had self-closing devices that weren't working?
Not particularly, if I'm honest with you, because self-closing devices, despite being an essential part of the fire safety system, if you live in a flat, are really quite irritating, because they can either make the door very heavy to open, so difficult for tenants to pull open. They make the door shut, hence the reason why they're self-closers. And it was my understanding that they're fairly easy to disable, and tenants, if they so wanted to, would disable them because they found them quite irritating.
Yes, I mean, irritating or not, it was the responsible person's obligation to make sure they worked, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
At the bottom of page 3 of this paper, we can see there's a table, and it sets out the indicative costings for an inspection and maintenance programme. You could see it there, £619,000 for the installation programme for the whole stock and £288,000 for the maintenance programme. Looking at section 2 there, which has some figures based on the following assumptions: 60% doors fully compliant. Do you see that?
Yes.
Were you satisfied that, given the reported difficulties with self-closing doors, the assumption of 40% requiring repair, replacement or adjustments was reasonable or realistic?
I must have assumed that it was realistic at the time.
Did anybody tell you that it was reasonable?
I don't specifically remember those words being spoken.
Did you have any advice on which you could rely to satisfy yourself that the figure of 40% not fully compliant was reasonable?
No.
Did the scale of the proposed programme give you any cause for concern about the fire safety consequences of such a significant problem with self-closing devices at this time?
Not at this time.
Was your greater concern in reality, Ms Johnson, for the cost consequences of a programme of repair, replacement and monitoring?
Cost is always a consideration whenever you're managing a budget which has considerable shortfalls and where there are many pulls on the different budget. But there's never been any dispute. There was never any dispute at RBKC about paying for measures that were required for health and safety, as was evidenced by the door closer programme that we undertook, the door programme that we undertook previously. I would have had concerns about spreading the cost and not having the cost all in 1 year, because that's a considerable amount of money, say near enough £1 million to spend on this programme in 1 year. But it would have been a secondary consideration to just the reality of being able to do it in that time period, and then what action the LFB were taking against us as a result of not being able to complete the programme in that time scale, and how we were going to do it, particularly based on the fact that we had so many leaseholders in the stock, and the majority of our stock was flats. 96% was flats.
Following this meeting, Barbara Matthews sent you an email, and we'll look at that. RBK 401979. Can I just ask you to look at that, please? It's 3rd of March 2017, second part of the screen. Laura, just to confirm our discussion and agreement at the joint management team on Wednesday, we agreed we'd have a programme of fitting of self-closers on existing flat doors, if not already fitted, and refit/repair self-closers if already fitted. This programme would not be over 1 year, but proposed as 3 to 5 years. Our recommendation is that the LFB are unlikely to accept as adequate a programme longer than 3 years, although this has yet to be proposed to them. The estimated cost for the total programme, regardless of period, is £619,000. That's a figure we've seen. In respect of a proposed annual inspection to check/repair/replace the self-closers, you requested that we delay starting this until we've obtained further legal advice on what action we can or can't take against no access by either tenants or leaseholders. Please let me know if I've incorrectly captured anything. In addition, please confirm we can include in our updated fire strategy a 3-year programme for fitting of self-closers on all flat entry doors. Regards, Barbara. Your response to that, we can see above that. Barbara, I can confirm that this is an accurate record of our discussion. I'd like to push the installation of door closers to a 5-year programme. It will make funding the programme more manageable. Therefore, in the fire strategy, I would like it to say 5 years rather than 3. I am not convinced of the need for an inspection programme. If we started one, then there is every likelihood it would have to be ongoing and therefore an additional expense to the HRA indefinitely, without any identifiable evidence that it impacted positively upon the fire safety of residents. I understand that the conversation is not always straightforward with the LFB, and they may well push for this, but if they want to, well, they can introduce it as a London-wide standard they will enforce against, rather than on a borough-by-borough basis, and we would make representation to the GLA accordingly. I look forward to the legal advice. Did you alone decide that the self-closing devices installation programme should be implemented over a 5-year period?
Yes, I requested that.
Did you take any advice from RBKC's health and safety advisor about the fire safety consequences of a widespread problem, such as with self-closing devices?
No, I did not.
Did you take any advice from that person about the fire safety consequences of putting it off over a 5-year period?
No, I did not.
Did you take any advice from any of RBKC's FRA team about the fire safety consequences of doing what you were proposing?
No, I did not.
Did you take any advice from anyone about whether the effectiveness of the fire safety measures for residential dwellings in the TMO's stock might be impaired by extending the duration of the self-closing device repair programme from 3 to 5 years?
No, I did not, but it was my full expectation that that 5 years would be shortened to a much shorter time period.
If you had needed a grant of additional money to fund a fire safety programme, to whom at RBKC would you have applied?
We either would have been able to get it from existing HRA resources, or if it was a significant sum of money, then we would have gone to Cabinet to request that money.
Did you consider whether to make an application for a grant of additional funding from either source for this programme?
No, I mean, it could be accommodated with existing resources at that time.
Why didn't you consider whether to make an application for a grant of additional funding from either of these sources?
In retrospect, I wish I had, but I didn't at the time.
No, but why didn't you at the time?
I didn't at the time because, as I've said, I wanted to take further legal advice at that time about the requirement for an inspection programme and also about our legal ability in order to be able to gain access to properties. Because I wanted to be very sure about how, if we were not going to gain access, what action we could take in order to get access.
Yeah.
And if we couldn't gain any access, then that's very difficult for us to be able to enact that programme.
Had you received the legal advice by the time you sent this letter?
No, I had not. No, it was pending.
When did you get it?
I don't remember when I received it, to be honest.
Was it before the fire or after the fire at Grenfell Tower?
If it came after the fire, then I'm afraid I wouldn't remember it.
It looks from this document that the sole basis of your decision to extend the duration out to 5 years was money. Is that fair?
It looks like that from this document, but I don't think that's a fair representation of my views on it, because there was very much a conversation about the reality of being able to do that based on our experience of the previous programme, which had taken years in order to be able to implement.
Indeed, but we don't see any trace of any other factor in this email.
No, and I don't, and I didn't write that in this particular email, so I can fully understand why the inquiry would draw that conclusion.
Were you aware that as a result of this email, Barbara Matthews amended the fire strategy to include a 5-year installation programme with no inspection arrangements?
I would have been, yes.
Was that your intention? It looks like this.
Yes, it would have been
this
my
email
intention.
It was. Yes. Would you agree that in practice your email amounted to, or at least was taken by Ms Matthews to be a direction to extend the duration of the installation programme with no inspection arrangements?
Yes.
What was your view of the LFB's clear advice on the need to maintain and inspect self-closing devices?
I don't remember exactly what my views were in March 2017, but all I can say is I was clearly in error. I accepted the fact that we needed a door closer programme and that one should be put in place. I wanted to do that with the full understanding of the legal advice required in order to be able to gain access, particularly to leaseholder doors. But what I really wanted to understand was whether statutorily we needed to do an inspection programme.
Did you take any steps to discover what the possible risks, health and safety risks, of failing to have working self-closing devices in TMO buildings were?
No, I didn't, and that was an oversight on my behalf.
I'm beginning to think this might be a good moment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask one question about it by reference to another document. It'll take 2 minutes, if I may. And then I come to the end of the topic. Can I ask you to look, please, at HOM 3045964? This is the LGA guide I referred to earlier, which was published. I said in 2011, I think it was published in 2011, but this version is in May 2012. Can I ask you to go, please, to page 125 and look at paragraph 82.3? Uh, 82, inspections and repairs of other safety measures. Underneath that, you'll see fire-resisting doors. At 82.3, good practice is to inspect timber fire-resisting door sets on a 6-monthly basis as part of a programme of planned preventative maintenance. These inspections are aimed at identifying defects such as first bullet point, missing or ineffective self-closing devices. And then at 82.4, flat entrance doors should be included within this programme. Where leasehold flats are involved, this will only be possible if there is legal right of access by means of a condition within the lease to carry this out. It is important that any new leases include such a condition. My first question is, were you aware that national guidance from 2011 and certainly May 2012 recommended a 6-monthly programme of planned preventative maintenance and inspections?
No, I was not.
You were not. Did you think to obtain advice or ask the TMO to obtain advice on the appropriateness of amending the programme?
Well, yes, I was seeking legal advice.
Right. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is that a convenient moment?
I think it is. Thank you very much. Now, before we finally rise to the day, how are we getting on with this witness?
Very well, indeed. We will not require Ms. Johnson's presence for the whole day tomorrow.
Well, can you be a little bit more specific?
Yes. It depends very much on what follow-up questions I'm asked to ask or I find to ask. But at the moment, I would think that we may well go up to lunchtime tomorrow, but not beyond.
Right. Well, Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry I'm going to have to ask you to come back to answer some more questions tomorrow, but there it is. Maybe that's not entirely unexpected, but that is the position. So we'll stop now for the day. We'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow, please. We'll do our best to get you away by lunchtime, possibly even earlier, to see what can be done. And in the meantime, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please.